All right, let's dive in here. You've brought some really interesting stuff today. Lyrics notes, even a request for analysis. It's like we're getting a look inside the creative process of someone named Jimmy James.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is that we're not just seeing the finished product, right? We're seeing the gears turning. He's reflecting on his tools, his inspirations, even the financial side of making art.
Exactly. And speaking of his process, he calls his style raplet type poemify type style. I
Yeah.
mean, that phrase alone makes me want to unpack what exactly he's blending together.
Yeah, it definitely suggests a fusion of influences. And that note about wanting to rhyme all of life makes me think he's using rap's wordplay to tackle deeper themes, like poetry does.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And he even mentions his ADHD as an influence, saying, wouldn't you know it about 2D43? Now I see. It was my ADHD that did this to me. I'm curious to see how that plays out in his work.
Yeah, it's a unique perspective for sure. It seems like he sees a connection between ADHD and his ability to remembering things with great care, which is interesting because it kind of challenges how people usually think about ADHD.
Absolutely. And then there's this app. He keeps mentioning this beautiful app with music labs that sound really crucial to his process. He doesn't name it, but he says he'd never pass this on for another app. What are your thoughts on this app just initially?
Well, his worry about coins running out suggests it's not just a simple writing tool, right? There's some financial element, maybe a subscription or in-app purchases. It's like he's found this digital space that's tailored for his creative needs, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah, and that cost seems to weigh on him. He even mentions potentially having to stop using it if he runs out of these coins. Even though he has a lifetime activation on these music labs, it just highlights the financial struggles a lot of artists face these days, even when they find tools they love.
Absolutely. It really raises questions about accessibility, in the digital art world. Is talent enough, or do you need a certain amount of money to really thrive?
That's a good point. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. He also has this podcast, The Jimmy James Show AZ, running since May 2020. Podcast and the Raplet style connect in his overall artistic vision.
It's possible the podcast is another way for him to explore those deeper themes we talked about earlier, right? Maybe it's more conversational, a way to dig into topics that wouldn't fit into a traditional song.
That's a great point. Now let's get into some of the actual lyrics we have. One piece starts with, I am lost. I am in pain. I am going insane. I've lost myself in this foggy mist of relentless rain. I mean, that imagery is so vivid. What jumps out at you in those first lines?
It's a really powerful image of feeling lost and overwhelmed. Right away, the foggy mist and relentless rain create this sense of being trapped, almost suffocating. It feels very personal, like we're seeing a moment of real vulnerability.
Yeah. And that vulnerability continues in the first verse. He says, I am sure that I'm not so sure anymore. I repetitively do the same thing. It's on repeat. Day in and day out is a stressful feat. But what is the meaning? It's that question, what is the meaning, that really gets me. It's something so many of us struggle with, right? Feeling stuck in a routine and searching for a purpose.
Totally. He's expressing this deep sense of disillusionment with the monotony of life, going through the motions but questioning what it all means.
Exactly. And then in the second verse, he shifts gears a bit, talking about the hate and people that aren't so great, almost like he's expanding his focus outwards to the world around him.
Yeah, it's like he's acknowledging that the world is full of beauty and ugliness, and he's trying to figure out how those two things coexist. He even admits that we as a people will never really know the true meaning of it all.
Which is such a human thing to say, right?
Yeah.
Wanting answers, wanting to make sense of things, but accepting that some things might always remain a mystery.
Absolutely. It's that search for meaning, that wrestling with uncertainty that I think makes his work so relatable. And then just when the lyrics seem to be spiraling into despair, there's this shift in tone in the bridge.
You're talking about where he brings in this concept of the afterlife, right? He states it pretty confidently. There is an afterlife, I must be honest in telling you, and the future of mankind, the truth of this to its fullness.
Yeah, it's a bold statement for sure, and it seems to be coming from a place of deep personal conviction. He says he's been to the spiritual and even spoken to someone who was skeptical, and he came out of that experience with this new clarity.
It's really interesting how he ties his personal experiences to this larger idea of the afterlife. Like he's trying to make sense of something so profound and ultimately unknowable.
And that desire to understand something bigger than himself seems to be a driving force in why he wants to share his message with others.
Yeah, he even talks about waiting for more signs to guide him, which suggests a sense of purpose, maybe even a mission to reveal these truths to the world.
Right. It's almost like he sees himself as a messenger, entrusted with this knowledge and compelled to share it, even if he doesn't have all the answers himself.
Well, we're starting to get a glimpse into the spiritual side of his worldview and how it's connected to his creative process. Let's pause here for now and pick up with the rest of these lyrics in part two.
Picking up where we left off, it's really striking how Jimmy's grappling with these huge existential questions, but also just the everyday realities of being an artist.
Oh, yeah, totally. He's weaving together these big ideas about the afterlife and spirituality with things like feeling lost and questioning your purpose, things everyone goes through.
Right, and let's not forget about those financial worries he mentioned. It's a good reminder that even when you're exploring these big themes, you're still grounded in the practical world.
It's that human element that makes his work so interesting. Okay, so before the break, we were about to get into the outro of this song. He says directly to the listener, "Spirits are among us. I would not joke about this. They are guardians and we are their light. So let's shine for them, for they cannot shine for us." What's your take on that?
It feels like everything's coming together here, right? All the themes. He's moved from this place of despair to a message of hope and connection. And there's a real sense of urgency in his voice, like a call to action.
It's like he's saying, look, don't just think about this stuff. Actually
Huh.
do something. Recognize the spirits and be their light. It's a powerful idea, this responsibility we have to care for each other, even beyond the physical world.
Absolutely. And then he leaves us with this line, let's recognize who they are before we leave this earth. I truly believe it's a gift and a curse. Kind of mysterious. What do you think that gift and a curse means?
It's definitely intriguing. I wonder if he's saying being aware of the spiritual realm is a gift, but it also comes with some weight, you know? Maybe it's not always easy to handle that connection.
That's a good way to put it. It definitely adds some complexity. Acknowledging that the spiritual journey isn't always simple or straightforward.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've covered a lot with just this one song, but there's another set of lyrics where Jimmy talks about his creative process and this raplet style. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on those.
Yeah, I'm ready to dig into those, especially after he mentioned his ADHD as a creative influence.
Right. He seems to embrace it, even finding happiness in it, which is refreshing given how much stigma there is around neurodiversity.
It challenges the idea that there's only one right way to think and create. He's turning something often seen as a weakness into a strength.
And he goes on to say something pretty bold about AI. Don't use AI to write your material. Do it yourself unless you're just starting out.
Hmm.
I mean, that's relevant now more than ever. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a strong statement. He seems to believe that AI is like a shortcut that could stop people from finding their own voice.
Makes you wonder how we preserve human creativity in a world where technology is always changing, right?
Definitely. And Jimmy seems to be saying, go back to basics. Tap into that true inner self he mentioned earlier. Resist the easy way out and embrace the messy process of creating something real.
He's drawing a line. It's like this is what real art is. And it goes back to how he rejects labels.
Yeah.
He's not just a rapper or a poet. He's making something new with Raplet.
Exactly. He's not fitting into a box. He's blending different genre styles to create something totally original, and that's what makes him so innovative.
Yeah, it's true experimentation.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of him wanting to rhyme all of life. He's not just writing songs. He's trying to capture what it means to be human through rhythm and rhyme.
I like that. That's a really good way to put it. He's using language to make sense of the world, to find meaning in everyday things, and to connect with people.
And it's not just the lyrics. Remember that beautiful app? He can't live without it. That seems to be a big part of how he creates, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Makes me think about how technology, when you use it the right way, can be powerful for creative expression. He's found something in this app that really works for him as a rap-lit artist.
It's almost like the app itself is part of his mind, a digital space where he can experiment and bring his ideas to life. And he said he can't imagine using anything else, even though it's expensive.
That shows how much he values that platform. It's clearly not just a tool, it's more like a partner in his artistic journey.
Right. Which brings us to his podcast, The Jimmy James Show, AZ. We don't have any clips from it, but we know it's been going for a while. He seems committed to it.
I wonder how he uses it to explore his creativity. Maybe it's more conversational, a way to get into things that wouldn't work in a song.
Maybe it's where he connects with other artists,
Yeah.
shares his thoughts, and helps those who are just starting out. It could be where he expands on that Raplet manifesto, encouraging others to find their voices.
That's a great point. It shows how many ways he expresses himself. He's not limited to one form or one platform. He's trying different things to share his message.
And speaking of different platforms, we do have a transcript from a YouTube video he posted. It seems to be about self-acceptance, mental health, and finding beauty in struggle.
Oh, yeah. In that video, he gets really personal, talking about his own struggles with depression and wanting to share a message of hope It's like he's creating a space to be vulnerable and connect with people.
He even says, I take this message and I deal it out to the world open. I can get through one of your souls. I can't fix it all, but I can try to start here. It's raw and honest. It shows a lot of empathy for people going through similar things.
It's like he's saying, I get it, you're not alone. And that's so powerful coming from someone who's been there himself and come out the other side.
It's inspiring. And it goes back to his focus on self-love. He's always reminding people, you are beautiful, and that's for you to reveal to yourself, and that's all that matters. It's a great message in a world that tries to tell us what we're worth based on what's on the outside.
He's challenging those standards and encouraging people to find their own worth.
It is a beautiful message. It brings us back to his Raplet manifesto, his call for authenticity. He's not just talking about it, he's living it.
Yeah.
Using his platforms to spread positivity and self-empowerment.
And he's doing it in a way that feels real, not hiding his struggles. That's why it's so powerful.
For sure. Okay, we've covered a lot here, from his lyrics to his YouTube video. We're getting a clearer picture of Jimmy James as an artist and a person.
We've seen his creative process, explored his style, and dug into the themes behind his work. But there's one last piece we need to look at, something that seems to be about memory and perception.
You're talking about the one that starts with memories, right? Where he says we separate our mind.
That's the one. It feels different,
Yeah.
more abstract and philosophical. Like he's exploring how the mind works and how we see the world.
Yeah, it's like a meditation on consciousness.
Totally. And it's a good way to end our deep dive into Jimmy James. It's like he's asking us to question everything we think we know, to look deeper and find our own way of making sense of things.
Well, this has been really interesting, and I've learned a lot. Let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll dive into that last piece about memories and see what we find. All right, so we're back, and we're finally tackling this last piece, the one that starts with memories. It just feels different from his other work, almost like a different style, you know?
Yeah, definitely. It's way more abstract and introspective, like he's exploring the inner workings of the mind, how we perceive things.
Yeah, right away he says, we separate our mind. We almost sort of sort or complicate, possibly even contemplate on a manifest. It's almost like stream of consciousness. What do you think he's getting at there?
I think it's about how our minds try to organize and categorize information, Maybe even questioning how much we're really in control of our own thoughts. The way he repeats sort emphasizes that, like we're always filtering and organizing our experiences.
Yeah, now he brings up this maniac manifest designed to go with your feelings and thought.
Yes.
It's a little hard to grasp, but it seems like he's suggesting our perceptions are shaped by what we already believe and feel.
Right. It reminds me of that idea of confirmation bias. You know how we tend to look for information that supports what we already think? Even if it's not really true, like we're creating our own stories based on what's going on inside.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And then he connects this to visuals, talking about photographs and videos as representations of memories and perceptions. It's like he's saying, even when we see something with our own eyes, our interpretation is still subjective.
Exactly. We're not just passively observing, we're actively creating meaning from what we see. And then he brings in social media, talking about this mainstream social media regime that influences how we understand the world.
It makes you think, is social media giving us a real picture of a world or just a curated version?
Right, and he asks, is this what the world loves or is it straight sex appeal? It's a pretty sharp critique of how superficial online culture can be.
It really challenges us to think about why we're on social media in the first place. Are we looking for real connection or just chasing likes?
And that's where his message of self-love and authenticity comes in again. He wants us to look inward to decide what's important to us and not just follow what everyone else is doing.
And he points out how quickly things change online with the line, do you post or do you just skip to the next part? It's like he's describing that feeling of constantly scrolling, never really stopping to engage with anything.
Yeah, it's a reminder that real connection takes effort and being present and being aware of what we're consuming and how it affects us.
He's definitely not holding back in his criticism of online culture. He calls it a sad depression of depictions of people with no sense or respect for direction for who you really might want to be. That's pretty intense.
It shows how much he cares about the impact of social media on our mental health and how we see ourselves. He seems to be really worried about the loss of genuine connection and the pressure to fit in.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to be careful about what we consume online and to prioritize real relationships. And then he ends with this line, just a little thought by Jimmy James and his little life tragically, these spiral delights. What an image to leave us with.
It's like he's acknowledging that life is full of contradictions, good and bad. struggles and triumphs, and all of it is part of this spiral. It's a reminder that even in tough times, there can be joy, and that our experiences, both good and bad, shape who we are.
It's a beautiful way to end our exploration of his work. We've gone through his lyrics, his creative process, his thoughts on technology and social media, and even his philosophical musings.
And through it all, we've gotten to know a really unique and insightful artist. Someone who's honest and vulnerable, but also hopeful and looking for connection.
Jimmy James might not be super famous, but his raplet style is a powerful example of what art can do. He's reminding us to be ourselves, to question what we see, and to find beauty in the messiness of life.
He's pushing us to be more than just passive consumers of media, to create our own realities both online and offline.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the creative world of Jimmy James. We hope you found it as insightful as we have.
And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep creating, and most importantly, keep shining your light.